My dad called me the disgrace of the family in front of 32 relatives. Everyone laughed. Not one person defended me. I smiled, reached into my purse, handed him a sealed envelope, wished him a happy Father's Day, and quietly walked out. 20 seconds later, I heard screaming behind me. By morning, our family's biggest secret belonged to everyone. My name is Emily Carter, and I'm 34 years old. For as long as I can remember, I wasn't just the least favorite child in my family. I was the cautionary tale my father used whenever he wanted to remind everyone what failure looked like. Some families have a golden child. Mine had two. My older brother, Daniel, was a successful attorney with a beautiful house, a beautiful wife, and two beautiful kids. Every Thanksgiving, Dad would brag about him like he'd personally argued every case Daniel had ever won. Then there was my younger sister, Rachel. She owned a chain of boutique fitness studios and had nearly 500,000 followers online. Dad called her our family's entrepreneur. Every achievement she posted somehow became one of his stories. And then there was me. Whenever relatives asked what I did, Dad always answered before I could. Emily's still figuring things out. It didn't matter that I'd been working as a financial investigator for nearly 8 years. It didn't matter that I loved my job. It didn't matter that I owned my own townhouse or that I'd paid off every dollar of my student loans before turning 30. To my father, success wasn't measured by integrity. It was measured by applause. And I never seemed to earn any. Growing up, I kept believing things would change. Every birthday, every graduation, every promotion, every Christmas. I thought maybe this would finally be the moment he'd look at me with the same pride he looked at Daniel or Rachel. It never happened. There was always another comparison. Why can't you be more outgoing like Rachel? Daniel already made partner. Your cousin bought a lake house. Maybe if you smiled more, people would like you. After a while, I stopped trying. Not because I'd given up on myself. Because I'd finally realized I wasn't competing against my siblings. I was competing against an impossible version of me that only existed inside my father's head. Mom rarely defended me, not because she agreed with him, because arguing with Dad was like arguing with a thunderstorm. Nothing changed. You only got wetter. So she learned to stay quiet. And eventually, so did I. By my early 30s, I'd built a peaceful life almost entirely outside my family. I had close friends, a career I genuinely enjoyed, neighbors who knew my name, weekends that belonged to me instead of endless family criticism. Ironically, the farther away I moved from my family, the happier I became. I stopped chasing approval. Or, at least, I told myself I had. Then, 3 weeks before Father's Day, an envelope arrived in my mailbox. Inside was an invitation. Carter Family Reunion. Father's Day. Same park. Same barbecue. Same people. At the bottom, someone had handwritten, Dad says everyone is expected. Expected. Not invited. Expected. I laughed when I read it. Then, I tossed the invitation into the trash. I had absolutely no intention of spending another afternoon pretending insults were jokes. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was my best friend, Sophie. She knew my family better than anyone, mostly because she'd spent years helping me recover from them. You got the invitation, didn't you? She asked. Straight into the trash. I figured. I don't need another lecture about disappointing everyone. She stayed quiet for a second. Then she asked something I wasn't expecting. What if this time isn't about them? What do you mean? What if you go because you're finally done needing anything from them? I frowned. I don't need closure. No, she said softly, but maybe they do. That sentence stayed with me all week. Not because I thought my father would suddenly apologize. I knew better. People like him rarely apologized. They rewrote history instead. Then something happened that changed everything. A routine financial investigation landed on my desk at work. Normally, I handled corporate fraud cases, misused trust accounts, hidden assets, forged documents. Nothing unusual. But while reviewing public property records connected to an unrelated investigation, one familiar name appeared on my screen. Robert Carter. My father's name. At first, I assumed it had to be another Robert Carter. There are thousands of them. But curiosity made me click. The address matched my parents' house. I frowned. The document itself wasn't illegal. But something about the filing didn't make sense. It referenced paperwork connected to my late grandfather's estate. Grandpa Harold, the man who had always treated me with more kindness than anyone else in my family. He'd passed away 4 years earlier. His estate had supposedly been settled within months. So, why was there new paperwork now? I couldn't legally investigate my own family through work. That would violate every professional rule I lived by. But public records were public. Anyone could request them, including me. That afternoon after work, I drove downtown and requested copies. The clerk handed me a stack of documents nearly an inch thick. "Estate records?" she asked. I nodded. "Family research." She smiled politely. I drove home with the papers sitting on my passenger seat. Something inside me felt uneasy. I couldn't explain why. That night, I made tea, sat at my dining table, and began reading. The first few pages were routine. Asset inventories, property transfers, bank statements. Nothing unusual. Then I reached one page. I stopped breathing. I read it once, twice, then a third time. "No," I whispered. There had to be some mistake. But the signatures were real. The dates matched. The account numbers matched. The more pages I turned, the worse it became. By midnight, I wasn't confused anymore. I was devastated. For years, I believed my father simply disliked me. The truth was far darker than that. What I uncovered wasn't just favoritism. It was a carefully protected secret, one that explained almost every painful moment of my adult life. I spent the next 6 days quietly gathering certified copies, organizing timelines, and verifying every document through legal public records. Not once did I confront my father. Not once did I call my siblings. I wanted facts, not arguments. The night before Father's Day, I slid every document into a large cream-colored envelope. I sealed it, wrote only 2 words across the front. "For Dad." The next morning, I dressed in a simple navy blue summer dress, picked up the envelope, and drove toward the annual family reunion. As soon as I walked into the park, I saw exactly what I expected. Dad was laughing with Daniel. Rachel was surrounded by relatives asking about her newest business. People hugged them, praised them, celebrated them. A few relatives noticed me. Most simply nodded, as if I were another guest instead of family. I smiled politely, clutched the envelope a little tighter, and quietly took my seat, knowing that before this Father's Day was over, everything my family believed about me was about to change forever. The reunion looked exactly like every Carter family gathering I'd attended since I was a child. Long folding tables covered with red and white checkered cloths. Children running across the grass. Uncles arguing over baseball. Aunts carrying trays of homemade desserts. Country music drifted from a portable speaker while hamburgers sizzled on the grill. From a distance, we looked like the picture-perfect American family. Up close, we were anything but. I took a seat near the end of the longest table. Not because there weren't better seats. Because that's where everyone silently expected me to sit. The farther away from Dad, the better. Rachel walked over first, carrying a glass of lemonade. She looked me up and down before smiling politely. "You actually came." "I did. I honestly thought you'd skip it again." "I almost did." She laughed softly. "Dad's been in one of his moods today. Just try not to argue with him." "I wasn't planning to." She nodded, clearly relieved. Not because she cared about me, because she hated uncomfortable family scenes. Daniel arrived a few minutes later. He shook my hand instead of hugging me. "How's work?" "Busy." "Still doing those investigations?" "Yes." He smiled. "Sounds stressful." "I like it." He shrugged. "I guess somebody has to do it." Before I could answer, Dad called everyone toward the buffet. "Food's ready." Immediately, everyone gathered around him. Just like always. He loved being the center of attention. He carved the brisket, told loud stories, accepted compliments as though he were hosting a television show instead of a family barbecue. Every joke earned laughter. Every opinion became fact. I stayed quiet, observing, listening, waiting. Aunt Linda sat beside me. She leaned close enough that only I could hear. So, I looked at her. When are you finally settling down? I like my life. Sweetheart, work isn't a family. I know. You aren't getting any younger. I smiled politely. I'll keep that in mind. She patted my hand as if she'd offered profound wisdom. Across the table, I caught Dad watching us. He smirked. That familiar expression. The one that always appeared just before he decided to embarrass me. An hour passed. People finished eating. Children opened Father's Day gifts. The atmosphere relaxed. Then Dad stood. He tapped his glass with a fork. The conversation stopped almost instantly. Here it comes. My favorite tradition, Uncle Steve announced. Dad's speech, someone added. Every year, my father gave the same Father's Day toast. He'd thank everyone for coming, tell old family stories, praise his children, or, at least, most of them. He lifted his glass. I've been blessed. Everyone raised theirs. I've watched this family grow into something I'm incredibly proud of. Applause. He pointed toward Daniel, my oldest son. Daniel smiled. A brilliant attorney. Hardworking. Dedicated. Makes this family proud every single day. More applause. Dad turned toward Rachel. My youngest. She grinned. Built an incredible business from nothing. Strong. Smart. Fearless. The family clapped again. I stared quietly at my untouched glass. I already knew what came next. The silence lasted only 2 seconds. Then Dad looked directly at me. His smile disappeared. And then, he sighed dramatically. There's Emily. Several relatives shifted awkwardly. I've always believed honesty matters. A few nervous laughs. So I'll be honest. He pointed his finger straight at me. I'm proud of all my children. He paused just long enough for everyone to lean forward, except the disgrace sitting at this table. The words hit like ice water. Nobody gasped. Nobody objected. Instead, a few people actually laughed. Not loudly, but enough. Enough to tell me everything I needed to know. Dad wasn't finished. 34 years old. He shook his head. No husband. No kids. Always buried in work. You know. He chuckled. Some people simply never figure life out. More uncomfortable laughter. Rachel looked down at her plate. Daniel avoided eye contact. Mom stared at the tablecloth. Not one person said, "That's enough." The silence hurt more than the insult. For years I'd imagined this exact moment. I'd pictured myself yelling, crying, walking out, throwing every painful memory back in his face. Instead, I felt strangely calm, almost peaceful, because for the first time, his opinion no longer carried any weight. I slowly stood. Every conversation stopped. Dad folded his arms. What? I smiled. Not the forced smile I'd worn for years. A genuine one. I picked up my purse, reached inside, pulled out the cream-colored envelope, the same one I'd sealed the night before. Without saying a word, I walked around the table. 32 pairs of eyes followed me. Dad frowned. What is this? I placed the envelope gently into his hand. Happy Father's Day. He looked confused. What's this supposed to be? I looked him directly in the eyes. The same eyes I'd spent my childhood trying to earn approval from. I hope it answers every question you never bothered to ask. His confidence flickered. Only for a second. Then he laughed. Oh, another one of your dramatic moments? I simply smiled. I've said everything I needed to say. I leaned over and kissed my mother's cheek. She looked startled. Then I turned toward the rest of the family. I hope you all enjoy the afternoon. Nobody stopped me. Nobody apologized. Nobody even asked me to stay. As I reached my car, I heard Dad's voice behind me. Emily. I didn't turn around. I placed my purse on the passenger seat, started the engine, and drove away. For several peaceful minutes, there was nothing but the sound of tires rolling across quiet suburban streets. Then my phone buzzed. Dad. I ignored it. 30 seconds later, Rachel. Ignored. Another call. Daniel. Ignored. Then Mom. Ignored. The phone continued vibrating across the console. Call after call. Message after message. I didn't need to read them. I already knew why they were calling. About 10 minutes after I left the park, my phone rang again. This time, it was Aunt Linda, the same aunt who'd asked why I wasn't married. For some reason, I answered. Before I could even say hello, all I heard was screaming in the background. People shouting over one another. Someone crying. Then Aunt Linda's shaky voice broke through the chaos. Emily. She sounded completely different. What did you put in that envelope? I looked ahead at the empty highway, tightened my grip on the steering wheel, and took a slow breath. For the first time in my life, the truth wasn't trapped inside me anymore. It was sitting in the middle of that family reunion, unfolding one page at a time. I pulled into a quiet overlook just outside town before calling Aunt Linda back. The screaming had stopped. Now all I could hear were scattered voices and someone crying in the distance. Emily, she whispered. Your father says these papers are fake. I closed my eyes for a moment. They're certified public records. Silence. He says you forged them. I expected him to. Another long pause. Then she asked the question everyone else was probably wondering. What exactly was in that envelope? I looked out through my windshield toward the river below. It wasn't one document. It was 23. Every page told part of the same story. The first showed my grandfather's original estate plan. Grandpa Harold hadn't left everything to Dad like we'd always been told. He divided a trust equally between his 3 grandchildren, Daniel, Rachel, and me. The money wasn't supposed to be available until we each turned 30. Dad had been appointed trustee. He had one job: protect it. Instead, he quietly emptied it. The second group of documents contained bank transfers. Hundreds of thousands of dollars had moved from the trust into accounts controlled by my father over nearly 6 years. The third section contained property records. Those missing funds had helped purchase 2 rental houses that Dad proudly called his investments. They had never been his. They belonged to all 3 of us. The final pages were the hardest to read. Copies of letters Grandpa had written before he died. One was addressed to me, another to Daniel, another to Rachel. None of us had ever received them. Dad had kept every one. Inside my letter, Grandpa wrote something I'll never forget. Emily, you've always been the honest one. Never let anyone convince you your worth depends on their approval. I cried the first time I read those words. Not because of the money, because for the first time in years, someone in my family had truly seen me. Back at the reunion, those letters changed everything. Later, Rachel told me exactly what happened. The moment Dad opened the envelope, he laughed. By the 3rd page, he stopped smiling. By the 10th, his hands were shaking. By the time he reached Grandpa's letters, he was yelling that I was trying to destroy the family. Then Daniel quietly asked one question. If these are fake, why are they notarized? Nobody had an answer. Mom reached for the papers. She read them herself. Halfway through Grandpa's letter, she sat down. According to Rachel, she looked at Dad with tears in her eyes. You told me the trust was empty. Dad couldn't even look at her. I was protecting the family. No, Mom replied. You were protecting yourself. That single sentence broke something inside the reunion. Relatives stopped defending him. Questions started coming from every direction. When did this happen? Where's the money? Did you really keep Grandpa's letters? Dad shouted over everyone. Claimed the documents were being taken out of context. Claimed I was bitter. Claimed I'd always wanted attention. But facts don't disappear because someone raises their voice. Within 24 hours, Daniel hired an estate attorney. Rachel requested a forensic accounting review. Neither of them called to accuse me. They called to apologize. Daniel's voice cracked the moment I answered. I should have listened to you years ago. You didn't know. I should have known. Rachel cried harder than I'd ever heard. I thought you were just difficult. I smiled sadly. So did everyone else. Mom came to see me 2 days later. She looked exhausted, like she'd aged 10 years in a weekend. She carried a small cardboard box. "I found these hidden in your father's office." Inside were dozens of old birthday cards, school awards, childhood drawings, letters I'd written to Grandpa. Every keepsake I'd believed had disappeared over the years. Dad hadn't thrown them away. He'd hidden them. I looked at Mom. "Why?" She wiped away a tear. "I honestly don't know anymore." She apologized over and over. Not for what Dad had done. For staying silent. I hugged her. Because silence hurts people. But acknowledging it is where healing begins. The legal process lasted several months. The estate was reopened. Financial records confirmed everything. The trust money had been misused. Assets were recovered. The rental properties were sold. What remained was divided according to Grandpa's original wishes. For the first time, justice wasn't just an idea. It actually happened. Dad never apologized. Even after every document was verified. Even after every lie collapsed. He insisted everyone had betrayed him. The truth was, he had betrayed himself long before I ever handed him that envelope. Months later, another family reunion was planned. Daniel invited me. Rachel invited me. Mom begged me to come. I thanked them, then politely declined. Some chapters deserve closure, not sequels. Instead, I spent Father's Day volunteering at the community center where Grandpa used to mentor teenagers. That afternoon, I sat on a park bench, holding the last letter he'd written to me. The paper was worn from how many times I'd read it. For years, I believed I wasn't enough. Not smart enough. Not successful enough. Not lovable enough. But I was never the disgrace my father called me. I was simply the one person willing to tell the truth. Sometimes people think winning means humiliating the person who hurt you. They're wrong. Winning is walking away with your integrity intact. That envelope didn't destroy my father. His own choices did. All I did was place the truth into his hands. And for the first time in my life, I walked away without carrying the weight of someone else's lies. I used to spend every birthday hoping my father would finally say he was proud of me. Now, the only approval I need is the one I see every morning when I look in the mirror. And somehow, that has become more than enough.